Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Sugar Plum Baked Brie Bites. That's right, we're using the same ingredients that go in traditional Christmas sugar plums, and we're using them to make what I think might be the perfect holiday appetizer. And if that's not enough, you will also see what I think is one of the funniest Food Wish fails of all time. But first things first, and to get started, we'll begin by chopping up some dried fruit, which can be anything you want, but I went with some dried cherries, some dried plums, or as they call them at the retirement home, prunes, as well as some dried cranberries. And to make the chopping easier, I like to wipe the blade of the knife with an oiled paper towel, which is going to help prevent it from getting all gummed up and sticky. And yes, a lot of people use a food processor, but if I'm only doing a small amount, that seems like a waste to clean. And this is only going to take you a couple minutes. But anyway, once we chop that fruit up into fairly small pieces, we will stop. And we will gather that all together, and then top it with some walnuts. And then we'll continue chopping, re-oiling our blade if necessary, until our fruit and nuts are chopped as finely as we want, which for me is going to be fairly fine. And I think walnuts work the best here. But if you want to use almonds or hazelnuts or pecans, this recipe will work exactly the same. And then once we have everything nicely minced, we'll go ahead and transfer everything into a bowl, and we'll add the rest of the ingredients, which for me is going to start with some apricot jam. And a lot of recipes use honey, so feel free to use that instead, or a combination. And then besides the jam and or honey, we will definitely want some freshly grated orange zest. And then we'll finish up with some classic Christmassy spices, including cinnamon, some freshly and finely grated nutmeg, some allspice, plus last but not least, a little touch of cardamom. And that's it. Once all that's in there, we'll simply take a spoon and give this a mix. And just like the dried fruit and nuts, feel free to add whatever spices you want in here. I mean, you are after all the sugar plum fairy, of which would be the best flavors to marry. But if you're not sure, just use what I used, since it was really, really good. Oh, and if we were making actual sugar plums, once we achieve the proper texture, we would roll this into balls, which apparently back in the day was considered quite the treat. In fact, I read a poem one time, and it was the night before Christmas. Sorry, 'twas the night before Christmas. And kids were actually dreaming of sugar plums. But we are not rolling balls. We're going to leave our mixture just like this, since we're going to use it to flavor some baked brie. And my original idea here was not bites. It was actually to do a whole baked brie. And what I did to prep it was go around with a knife scoring it about a 1/4 inch down from the top, just cutting in a little bit. And the reason I did that is so I could then take a string, and if we place the string in the cut, and then pull on both ends, that string will neatly and cleanly cut that brie all the way across. And that really is the only good way to cut open a brie, since it's so sticky, if you try to use a knife it will just break apart. And by the way, if you're doing the version where you stuff this and then wrap it in pastry, you'll probably want to make that cut right in the center, so your filling stays nicely centered in the middle. And of course, once it's cut, we have to sample it. Okay, we can't be serving untested brie. And yes, it was fine. But anyway, my plan was to put the big piece on a pan, and then top that with our sugar plum mixture, which I tried to push down as firmly as I could without the brie breaking. And then once that was set, I took that thin lid I'd cut off, and I cut that into 6 wedges and placed those over the top. And after decorating with a dried cranberry in the center, I thought I would pop this in a 400-degree oven for, I don't know, about 10-15 minutes or so. And I figured that brie would warm through and get nice and runny, and those wedges on top would kind of separate a little, making for a really cool design. So that's what I thought would happen. But after only about 6 or 7 minutes, here's what actually happened. Oh yeah, now that's what we call in the business a miscalculation. But as you well know, we never let the food win. So after cursing a few times, I grabbed a knife and a piece of bread, since I figured I could at least taste how the hot brie worked with that sugar plum mixture. And oh my goodness, it was incredible. Right, that aromatic sweetness of the spiced fruit and nut mixture with that rich, fatty, warm brie was just absolutely fantastic. Except I decided the sugar plum mixture definitely needed some salt, which I should have known, but I didn't. But now I do. And besides the seasoning, I thought to myself, If what we're after here is a bite of bread, topped with some warm brie, flavored with sugar plum, why don't we just save a step and make individual bites instead? So I went ahead and whipped up another batch, which may or may not have included the stuff I scraped off that first try, and I stirred in a nice big pinch of salt. And then I placed a spoon of that on some sliced baguette, which as you can see is on a lined baking sheet. And then once my bread was sugar plums, I took out a spare brie. Oh yeah, I like to keep an extra few around just in case. And I cut that in half, and then turned it and cut it into slices. And then I think we all know what's coming next. I pieced those slices together to cover the top, trying to go for full coverage. And as I was doing this, I was thinking, I'm so glad that whole brie attempt failed, since I think this is going to be so much better. And not to spoil the ending, but it was. And that's it. Once those were topped, I went ahead and transferred this into the center of a 450-degree oven for about 12 to 15 minutes, or until they look like this. Oh yeah, now that looks appetizing. But before we serve up, we should probably let it sit for about 5 minutes, just so that cheese that dripped off tightens up a little bit, so when we pick these up, that comes with it. And while these cooled, because I had it, and I was a little bored, I went ahead and garnished the tops with a little bit of chopped cranberry. And that's it. After cooling for a few minutes, I transferred those onto a board to serve. And after taking a few contractually obligated pictures, I picked one up and went in for a bite. And that, my friends, was absolute perfection. Okay, I love a whole baked brie, especially one that would be flavored with the sugar plum mixture. But what that doesn't have is brie that is dripped off and caramelized onto the bottom of the pan that I get to eat with every bite. So not all failures are bad failures, since that ridiculous-looking first attempt actually led me to this. Although at this point I realized this was missing one thing, and that was a little bit of chopped rosemary. But I was out of light, so I ate a few more of these and called it a day, and then I whipped up one more batch with my other spare brie and garnished this one properly. And not only does that rosemary work with the red and green Christmas color theme, but when you consider the flavors we used here, the taste of the rosemary was a perfect pairing. And if I'm at a party, holiday or otherwise, and I'm holding a glass of wine or a nice cold beer, I can't think of anything I'd rather be noshing on. But no matter what beverage you enjoy these with, even if it's just a glass of nice cold fresh water, I really do hope you give these a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.